Okay. Let me just look for a template, a guiding template. Can you all see my screen?
Oh, yes, Doctor.
Okay. So I don't really have a plan for this, but let me start. We all know where we begin from. We have discussed this in detail, where we begin from when we are starting with research. We start with an area of interest, something we may have observed in our working place or in general in something else that is within our profession. And we begin by reading. Begin by reading literature, published articles on your area of interest to discover the research gaps. So once you've started that, you begin the process of writing your concept paper. So just if you think of the term concept, the term concept itself, what it means, just the word concept. Let me just quickly type in and see. And here in the definition, it says an abstract idea. Yeah, an abstract idea, a notion, conceptualization theory. So it's an idea that you're beginning to develop. So one of the things that I would like you to understand is that as you hear the word, it's an idea. When you have that concept, it doesn't mean that it's complete. So as you're writing it yourself, don't put yourself on pressure to have something perfect. First of all, we are human beings. It's not possible to be perfect. Just the mere fact that we are human beings. Secondly, the fact that this is the beginning stage, don't put yourself on pressure that things must be perfect, but simply put in an effort to communicate your idea. Okay, communicate. So first, I'm not going to look at the title. I think the title is something that can even come at the end. But first, I would start with the introduction. Okay, start with the introduction. So here, what would I do? I want to go back to my whiteboard here and begin to share with you the idea of a chapter structure. Okay? Can we do that? We start with the idea of a chapter structure. Is that okay?
Mm.
So actually, let me get, let me actually get, instead of getting a chapter, the whiteboard, let me actually share again. Let me share my whole screen and then pull out an actual Microsoft Word blank page. So this is my concept paper. And then I say introduction. Before I even talk about the topic, I start with introduction. And then the first thing I want to ask myself, what do I want to talk about? What is my research about? So can somebody give us an area of interest? that we can use as a sample.
Let me give an area.
Yes, please.
We could say maybe cultural diversity training in workplaces.
Cultural diversity training
Training in workplaces.
in workplaces. What would be the challenge that you have seen? What would be the area of interest? What is the thing that has piqued your area of your interest in this?
Now, I was looking at that, especially when you're looking at a working environment whereby you're having different ethnicities.
Mhm,
Like maybe you're working with Indians, you're working with Chinese, you're working with Americans.
mhm,
So when you're looking at that, let me say, that working environment
mhm,
whereby all of you can work as one person without
mhm,
being maybe discriminated or without being targeted,
mhm,
or when people have like some sort of like equal rights.
mhm.
That's why I was looking at this thing called cultural diversity.
Okay, okay. So let us say we would start with, when we're doing the chapter structure, even here you can actually put concept paper, we can say concept paper structure, because it's not it's not necessarily a chapter, but it's a concept paper. So the first thing, maybe in the introduction, we would begin to talk about the workplace environment currently. Here what I would, let's say if I'm the writer, I want to communicate how currently, if you go to most organizations, most formal organizations, you'll find you'll find an array of cultures and nationalities. Yeah. The working place environment currently in formal organization. Could I say formal? What's the best way that in would I say formal?
I think formal organizations can also.
In formal organizations. Workplace are predominantly predominantly how do I phrase this? Predominantly, so
predominantly mixed culture,
predominantly mixed. Should I say? I'm trying to think of the right word. Predominantly
mixed in terms of culture.
Mixed. Did I say mixed or
multicultural? Predominantly multicultural.
Are predominantly
multicultural.
This one's the spelling will come in late. Multicultural. So that statement, I know, with this statement, I know that I must make an effort to discuss, probably in a paragraph, about the workplaces now, that we are now a global environment, a global economy, where nationalities are not restricted to their geographical location, to their native geographical locations, but are now interchange, are now the labor force market is now international. So I know I have to make that kind of discussion. Then another point I'll put that another paragraph I would say, this creates opportunities but also, unfortunately, has created, has experienced, let me not say created, has experienced what do we want to call it? What Kenneth was trying to say, that you have these organizations which are you have these organizations with multiple with different nationalities, different tribes and cultures, and because of that, you have a situation of the lack. I don't want to say racism. I would rather want to say that there is. Sorry, give me a minute, please.
Milton, please mute your microphone. I think
Sorry.
guys, all of us should mute.
Sorry for the disruption. So where was I? That what Kenneth was saying, that we have a situation where you have these people from different cultural backgrounds coming together. I wouldn't want to use the term racism. Maybe I'd rather say let's not be harsh, because this is an academic. Maybe let us say that.
Probably use the challenges of cohesion.
Yes.
Something associating it with challenges with cohesion.
Yeah, the experience challenges.
Yes. Yeah, maybe we would say this creates opportunities, but unfortunately, challenges associated with cohesion.
Yeah, cohesion
between the members.
Because of the
among the members, yeah.
Yeah, of the different cultural backgrounds. Now, the writer here then knows they must expound further with another short phrase, just to say how people with different cultures have certain they come with the set mindsets, set behavior, certain set behavior characteristics, and this may create misunderstandings in terms of communication, in terms of work habits, and so on and so forth. And so now at this point, my third point to put in the introduction is what we hope to do. Yeah. So Kenneth, what I would ask you, maybe in this research, do you want to talk about the need for cultural diversity training, or implementing it in a certain context to see what happens? Are there propositions or something like that? Depending on what maybe you might have read. Yeah.
I think maybe we could be justifying the need for multicultural training, maybe.
Okay, the need for it.
Yes.
Okay, then here we will talk about the need for it, for multicultural training, or rather cultural diversity training. Yes, please.
Yes.
My question here is, aren't you supposed to first introduce what culture diversity is in the introduction?
Now, this is okay. Here, first of all, what we're doing, we are creating a chapter structure. Yeah,
yes,
that's what we're doing. So now at this point, the writer knows that probably I may state this in this section. They can even put a note, a paragraph here to say, sorry, in addition, sorry, let's say something like a plus definition. Actually, not even a plus, sorry. The writer can decide to create subnotes around it, to say defining cultural diversity. Then you say globalization of the world economy. Guys, is it the world economy? And then whatever else you may think about, you can add it here. Then also here on under 2, you go ahead and create a subsection so that you know exactly what you want to talk about underneath each section. So far, does that answer your question, Pauline?
Yes, please, it does.
Okay, so thank you for raising that. So here in the third part, when you talk about the need, here you would give a hint, Kenneth, you'd give a hint in this section on what researchers are proposing. Yeah, just a hint. What researchers are proposing. Then we come to the background. Yeah. So we come to the background. So the background is essentially telling us about the nature of your problem, your research problem. Yeah. And here you can be, already you have defined what cultural diversity is. You've talked about globalization of the world economy. And then you can start by talking about, just a suggestion, you can start by talking about the emerging globalized economy. Yeah. And here you can talk about, you can just give a brief history of where this brief history of where this new economy has come from. Globalized. The growth. And the
Can you
opportunity.
put comparison?
Pardon?
Can you put comparison like, can you compare? Can you make a comparison?
Comparison
like with you compare it with culture, with workplaces that don't have those different culture or different kinds of people.
I think if you did, you'd be taking the reader outside of your research, of your concept. I think if you did that, you take the reader out of your concept. What I would advise is always stick to what you want to research, what you want to talk about. You don't want a situation where you take the reader out, and then every time you're giving your work to your supervisor is saying, but what do you want to do? You don't want that situation. You want to keep it within your research interest, your area of research interest. So here, if we talked about the opportunities, this new economy has introduced. So here already you are actually pointing out the significance and maybe the need for why we really need to handle this situation. So here I can just stop there, then I come to the second part.
Well, hold on, back to what Kenneth was explaining in the background. Culture diversity training in places, it's like having different kinds of people coming together to do the same job, bringing the different ethics, different.
I think
No,
what
I meant was
doing. Yes, Kenneth.
You know, in some environments, some work environments, you may find yourself in a situation whereby you're working with people from different countries. Maybe you're working with Chinese, you're working with Indians, you're working with some people from West Africa, some people from South Africa, you're working with some Arabs. So in such an environment, you find that the people have different cultures, the religion is different, the way of life is different. So at a certain point, it could bring in some tension. Like for me, for instance, where I was working some time back, there was a guy who was an atheist. For him, he does not believe in God. So,
but how is it going to influence your work? Does it mind?
It will influence your work because in such an environment where you need to work together, at a certain point, you may not, like, for instance, the way maybe the way they do their things, the way they eat, the way they, just the culture alone. You find people segregating themselves according to where they come from. Maybe they don't want to mix with these people. Maybe they don't want to collaborate because maybe he feels I will work more better with somebody from my same country. And maybe because of ABC and that generally that tension in a work environment that you couldn't say is brought up by maybe somebody, that maybe you couldn't say that's who somebody is, but that is just somebody's culture. For him, he does not see himself as doing a wrong thing. He looks at it as if it is correct.
Okay.
So how does it affect the work environment?
So what training would you expect to give to such people? Because remember, it's their personality. And are you doing the same job? Yes, they work with you in the same place, but are they, what training are you expected to give? So what are you achieving at the end of the day? When you train them, what do you want them to come together to? I feel there's a question mark for me.
The whole point of training, I wouldn't call it training as such, but maybe educating people about their different cultures and how they work. Okay.
Yes. So what do you want them, at the end of the day, what is your outcome? What do you want?
The whole goal is, you know, when you're in such a work environment and there is that sort of like tension, okay? There is no way you can work together. Like, I'll give you an example. In an organization, it's supposed to be teamwork for the organization to achieve its goals. So where there is no teamwork, then don't expect some goals to be achieved, okay? Because of maybe some tension somewhere, somehow. And the whole point for this entire training is to educate people that for you, if you believe that you're an atheist, then I don't have a right to come and condemn you, or I don't have a right to say that I do not need to work with an atheist, because at the end of the day, the organization it's not going to achieve its goals. That is the whole point. Like, I'll give another example. In the Middle East, they believe in slavery. Here, you will look at it as a very, very bad thing, but for them, they look at it as something that is normal. You get? So if you're dealing with such a person who knows that slavery is something that even let me say my culture allows, or maybe my religion allows, then definitely it's going to bring in some sort of tension in the working environment. That was the whole concept.
So from what I'm getting from Kenneth, from what I'm getting from Kenneth's argument is that he has seen this issue of cultural incohesion. Should I say there is a lack of cohesion because of cultural diversity, and he wants to implement a cultural diversity training to see if it will achieve cohesion. Should we put it that way?
Yes,
It's
yes,
something
doctor.
like
That's
that.
what I was trying
Yeah,
to put
because
it.
yeah,
Okay. Okay. Then
'cause
someone else had a
also
point? Yes, yes, Pauline, you were saying?
Yeah, through you, doctor.
Yes, yes,
I had
Giles.
something to say, doctor. Maybe to expound on what Kenneth is trying to put across, so that Ayen can be able to understand. In this class that we're having this lecture, we're able to, the cohesion exists because we're all able to speak one language, and that is English. In the
Yes.
instance where Mchiga decides to speak Ruchiga and Acholi decides to speak Ruchiga, Acholi, then no one will be able to pick and understand. Probably we'll raise our voices and ask them to speak English. It's very common that when we're in maybe a group of people and there are two people who decide to speak maybe the language that they best understand, which the other people do not understand, there will always be some bit of query. But in a case like this one here, where we're all speaking English, there's some level of cohesion. Now we all have different beliefs. We have the Chinese who have their beliefs. We have the Ugandans and Nigerians. Once we are together, there are quite a number of differences that exist between us. Now, what Kenneth is trying to put across, he's looking at a situation where where maybe measures will be put in place so that cohesion exists. We're able maybe to appreciate that so-and-so is a Chinese and they can eat while walking, it's very fine. Or maybe so-and-so has this kind of beliefs. So we put such kind of measures so that we're all able to work together, be able to communicate without affecting the workflow at the place of work. My submission.
Thank you, Giles. Someone else had a comment? Pauline, you wanted to say something?
yeah, I wanted to just having so many thoughts on this topic. And then the culture diversity, I thought it's something personal that when you want to change someone's culture, yes, they have an understanding of
I
working
don't think Kenneth is proposing that by the cultural diversity training, one is going to change their culture, but one is able to understand
the need to work together.
Yes, that is able to understand the other person without looking at them as this horrible human being. This one doesn't believe in God. These people eat while walking. What basically just imagine, like now we are going through a class of research methods. We are not the same people as we were when we started. The knowledge we have received has changed us. It hasn't changed who we are, but it has helped us to grow. So also is what any training that anyone receives, it helps someone to grow, and therefore and therefore also changes your actions. So in other words, the training that any kind of training you get doesn't change who you are. Take an example. Let me just give you an example. My PhD, I did it in the Netherlands. But when I went, of course, the first time I left Uganda was when I went to do my master's. And of course, then I was young and impressionable, and I could have easily changed myself for the sake of everyone around me liking me. But when I went to do my PhD, of course, I was mature. I knew who I was. And the thing I did not want to do was to lose myself. So I remember like an example someone, I think Giles or Kenneth gave that someone eats while they're walking, you understand it. So I remember I was one time in my room and I looked through the window, I saw somebody walking, eating a sandwich. And then I remember telling myself, Sheba, this is their culture, but don't do it. That's not your culture. You understand it's theirs, and then it's not bad, but you understand you shouldn't do it because your culture is Mtoro, and this is how you're supposed to behave as you eat. So in other words, Pauline, it didn't, the fact that I was a bit more mature, I didn't change my culture, but the maturity helped me to recognize that this is the Dutch culture, and it doesn't mean they are bad, but it's just the way they do their things. Pauline, I don't know if you understand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
so
just
yeah, so that's what the proposal is aiming for, to bring that
Okay.
understanding and therefore cohesion.
okay.
Yeah. Did you have any other
Okay.
question?
No, I think I'll get them as we go on. Let's just go on.
Okay.
So
So, but
maybe
are
just
we
to-
so far? Sorry, is there someone else saying?
I was just trying to say that maybe to add on top of what you've said,
Hmm.
you know, like you put it, if somebody is an atheist, it does not mean that you should condemn him that is an atheist. Because there are some people who will say, for me, I'm not going to work with an atheist because maybe I'm a born-again Christian, I cannot work with an atheist. But at the end of the day, the whole point of being in such an organization is because you want to achieve the goals of the organization. That is the most important thing. So
Yeah.
if this person is an atheist, another person is a Muslim, the other one is a Buddhist, the other one is an Orthodox Christian, the training does not mean that you're going to change the way what he believes in. You're just trying to put in, you're just trying to maybe to inform those people that it is okay to be who you are, but at the end of the day, the first priority should be to achieve the goals of the organization without having to label somebody as bad or good.
Yeah.
That was the whole point.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you, Kenneth. Ogola, you had something to say?
Yes, thank you, Doctor. And maybe for me, my inquiry is really on, because I remember when we, at some time back, I tried to speak of a point, of a topic, and you asked how this links to ICT. So
Yes.
maybe I am seeking from Bwana Kenneth to try, how does this link to maybe ICT? What is the linkage between this topic and the program we are on as ICT?
Now, we're looking at it, we are not looking at it in terms of technical people. That's the first thing. Because I know all of us come from ICT backgrounds, but we're looking at it from a generalized point of view, like researchers. That is all I can say. I wouldn't say maybe let us look at maybe a topic connected to ICT. Those topics are very many. We saw them last time, but just we're looking at a general point of view of maybe somebody who is outside there doing research on something specific.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Kenneth. I think now we've understood. We are not necessarily looking. This is not an ICT related topic, but this is just to see you have an idea. How do you start working on it, regardless of whether it's ICT, IS, something like that. But whatever that, the principles still remain the same. You notice here at the end of the introduction, you said what are other researchers? What are researchers proposing? Proposing in relation to lack of cohesion in multicultural organizations. Yeah, what are other researchers? So basically here, the person, the writer, you're basically now saying, this is where the gap is, and this is what we want to address. Already, you are stating your research objective, your research problem and research objective. Now here, I kind of lost track of what I was thinking, but after we discuss emerging globalized economies, what would be the next best topic? I had thought about it. Now that the mind has gone with all the discussions we've had. How we see the opportunities, then we start discussing what are multicultural multicultural organizations. Yeah, what are multicultural organizations? What is their global distribution? If you have any statistics on that, in how many countries do we find multicultural organizations? What is their contribution to these economies? In these economies, I mean where you actually find multicultural organizations. Then you begin to talk about the challenge of lack of cohesion. Now you realize, even just for us, because of cultural diversity. Now you realize, just by us discussing this, we've actually begun to comprehend a bit more. Some, like, now we discussed and then we found out the word cohesion, as opposed to using a word like racist, because racist can be quite, it's a big word. Sometimes if someone may feel like you're pointing a gun at them, and yet the person may genuinely fail to gel with another person, maybe just because of a lack of understanding. Pauline, you have a question?
No, I was actually just agreeing with you.
Yeah. So I think that using that, the challenge of lack of cohesion, and then here we can begin to, what is what you can say, what do researchers in this field say about what researchers here, that is basically, this would be researchers in the organizational field, these are people in business, in business research, or even human resource research, in those areas. What do they say about lack of cohesion due to cultural diversity in organizations? So here you'd be telling us what others are saying about it, and maybe the impact it has, impact of culture, of lack of cohesion from cultural diversity. Then you come to the next thing, proposed solution from researchers in this field. And here you talk about research gap. Then you go ahead in this particular one, in this particular section, you propose a cultural diversity training for a, I would put here dash 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 organization. Yeah, because you'd have identified a case study for that. Now, at this point, this is when I would bring in what could statement of the problem. Let me move this up. So now already from your discussion here, you'd have stated the problem. But here, so now you'd probably take up just one paragraph to state this problem. Just one paragraph will do it. The challenge of cultural diversity.
Excuse me, Doctor.
Yes, please.
Yeah, before we move to the statement of the problem.
Yeah.
I've been involved in a lot of writing.
Yes.
And then I also do read write-ups.
Yes.
I have always found that a lot of some of the issues that are mentioned in the background are also mentioned in the introduction.
Yes.
What is the clear-cut difference between introduction and background?
Now, the introduction is a very small section. Essentially, when any reader is looking at your introduction, it should be really small, like probably one or two, about 2 paragraphs maximum, 2 or 3 paragraphs, but it should be really small and generic in nature, small and generic in nature. And so you don't go in detail. So the minute someone reads your introduction, they should know what your research interest is and what your problem is, and briefly what you want to do. So it's a really summarized section, very, very summarized. Then the background, you're discussing in detail. Yeah, you are discussing in detail. I don't know if I'm making the point here. I don't know if I'm making, I'm being clear on this. So let me, if you look at this background, all of these are just ideas about what the writer, what you are going to, the statements that you're going to make, that the arguments you're going to give as the researcher. So this is just a hint of what you need to discuss, but it will be in detail. You'll be quoting, referencing others, discussing a bit more of the history. It's not just one sentence that you're giving here, but it's a full discussion. Then also, so are the opportunities in the economy. It's also another, probably this is another paragraph. This is one paragraph, this is another paragraph, but discussing and referencing the whole time. Then you come to this second section. This is another theme that you're raising. What are multicultural organizations? You define them, what they are. You speak a bit more, you reference others, what others are saying. Then what is their global distribution? How far-reaching are they? Are they just found in Europe and in the US? But we now see that they're in India, they're in Africa. In Africa, practically in every country, you'll find Chinese, you'll find Indians, you'll find Arabs, and so on. Okay, even Arabs are part of Africa. If you now go to places like Dubai, which is supposed to be a very conservative Islamic cultural society. Now, yesterday I was watching on TV, if any of you, especially the ladies, have watched this series, The Real Housewives of this, there's now The Real Housewives of Dubai. And you see them dressed in these skimpy things, and yet Dubai is supposed to be an Islamic place. The other day, my sister went there for work, and she arrived there on Sunday, and they were going out on safari, and she sent us a picture. She was wearing shorts. We said, hey, And they're going to grab you. She said, I saw even people wearing even shorter shorts. These ones are even long. So you can imagine it's now that globalized. So here, the person would be giving a full discussion on this, and so are these. Sorry, this I've moved this by accident. So Giles, you notice that the introduction itself is brief, but however, immediately the reader first looks at it, they must understand what it is you're trying to say, what your research is about. Why is it that we're that precise? Remember, research, whoever is reading, you yourselves have been asking you to get articles and reading. If I asked each one of you how you felt, I'm sure it was work. Anyone trying to read a research article, it's work. So it is important that immediately you hit the nail on the head. Otherwise, if you go outside of your research topic and you start talking about organizations, you start talking about business, how they're supposed to achieve their goals, and so on and so forth. Just in the introduction, the reader gets bored. Yeah, the reader gets bored. And remember, one of the most important things when we're doing research, especially when we're in the academic, in school, still at university, you want to capture your reader's attention immediately. You want to capture their attention and hit the nail on the head so that they know this is what this person is writing. Giles, I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, you have. Would I say that the background takes some bit of the muscle of
Yes.
what you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, should I say that it takes the meat?
The flesh,
Yeah, the
yeah?
flesh itself, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. So now here in the statement of the problem, you'd actually state the problem outright. Say the challenge of cultural diversity the challenge of cultural diversity causing a lack of cohesion in multicultural, that under spelling, we can change it later, multicultural organizations, the need for cohesion and the need for cultural diversity training to enable cohesion at the workplace. Okay, so now if the researcher discusses this in detail, immediately the reader knows what, and also here in the problem statement that the writer can go ahead and say this persuade the place of implementation. So here the person will be talking about their case study. And here briefly, also this briefly here, I think in this section, sorry, so it would be probably in the problem statement. In this section, the writer can begin to, just talk about the case study only. The rest will come in the section where you talk about your research design, where you'll actually implement it. So then you come to your, here in the research gap, you'd make a hint at your research question because it's related to the research gap. So here, when we begin to talk about our research objective, we first state where can I first move this down? we first state our research question. Sorry. We can even put research question and objective. Okay, but mostly they want to see research. Most lecturers know research objective. For you, you can start by stating your research question, and here you explain. Explain why is it significant to answer this question. And basically you already, here you're not quoting anyone, you have already stated in the background the research gap. So here you'll be explaining the research gap. So that you say by answering this research gap, by answering this question, you're answering the research gaps that you had stated here. Then you go ahead and state your research objective. And here I would explain. Most of the time you find students don't bother to even explain why. And some supervisors don't even bother. But I remember when I was doing my research, my supervisor said for the research question, explain, give an explanation without referencing anyone, because you've already written all your references here in the background, in the background of the study. You've already given enough evidence to show that there is this research gap. So here you just explain, just put a small paragraph explaining how achieving this objective will close the research gap or answer the research question. Okay? Then after this, talk about your specific objectives. Yeah. Now, your specific objectives, you're basically splitting your overall objective. You're basically splitting your overall objectives into three or four, usually 4 objectives. Yeah. By splitting this up, you're making it more manageable. And at the end of each milestone, it answers a question which leads to the second objective. It gives you the answer to the third, and so on and so forth. So now, can we do this one together? Can we split this overall objective, yeah, which is diversity, cultural diversity, cultural diversity training for cultural diversity training for employees in a multicultural organization. Can we split this up together? What is the first specific objective we need?
What if we say to understand maybe how multicultural training works in organizations? Can that work?
Understand. How would that lead?
How can it be conducted, in other words?
Maybe understanding would be better. We first understand.
Just
Doctor.
Yes, please.
I would think that first of all, they would understand the different cultures. And that one maybe before we can continue.
We understand the different cultures. If we say that, won't we be now going into into ethnographic research here? If we try that, remember we are looking at the cultures within the organization, within the cultures within an organization. Yes, Eddie.
Yes, Doctor. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I think we just have to first identify the different aspects or indicators of multiculture. We break it down. We see the different dimensions of it, and then from it, it's where we generate the objectives from.
Yeah, yes, I think that one so far. Yes, then Kalule.
What if we say to find out whether multicultural diversity affects the performance of employees within organizations?
Now, if we do that, if we to find out, how does that contribute to our solution? Because we already know there is an effect. We're already aware. What we want to do is to implement a solution. I think that would be better to first I think it would be better to first understand that domain of first of all, let me put it this way, or rather, objective A. I think what Kenneth and Eddie said, I think that was it. It was about, if I first phrase it into a question, what makes up a multicultural workplace? If I first turn it into a question, then I can first phrase it into, an objective. Would that help us understand the specific dimensions and the unique characteristics that we find within a multicultural workplace? And once we understand that, it leads to our second objective. What the designing the appropriate cultural diversity training, designing basically, if this was a system, would now be saying, now let us design based on now understanding what makes up that multicultural workplace. Does that make sense to anyone?
Yes, doctor.
Okay. So if I turn this into an objective,
what
yes,
makes
please.
up a what makes up a multicultural workplaces? Are we going to look at different, like religion, ethnicity, nationality, language?
Yes.
Is that what answers?
Also in that, we also begin to see even the specific challenges that arise as we discuss it. Now, the one thing we've not made clear, because actually we're not reading literature, is whether this is what research approach we need for this.
Doctor.
Yes, please.
Doctor, according to what we have here, it is we are taking a qualitative direction.
Yes. here we are taking a
qualitative
kind of
direction.
qualitative direction.
One thing, our research, Kenneth's research topic that he generated for this particular class, it has no variables. It is direct.
Yes, yes,
Therefore,
that
it's
is
something
true.
qualitative.
Eddie, thank you for that. Giles, you had something to say? No? Okay, let's move on then. Let me first check the chat room for questions. Eddie is asking, what is the acceptable length of a concept paper at UMU in terms of pages? I don't think that UMU has ever put a statement. There's one for the thesis. Thesis for master's minimum, I think, is supposed to be 75 pages. But concept paper, because it's really small, maybe 5 pages, 5-6 pages. Yeah. So then,
Okay.
I would ask what makes up. So if I turn this into an objective, I would say determine the makeup of a multicultural workplace. Two, for me, this one I just first turned it into a question. A question, but because UMU is more interested in objectives, I'd rather leave it for direct in terms of objectives. Then the next, it so design a cultural diversity training for a multicultural organization. Now, the one thing that may be a challenge for us at the moment, we have not talked throughout about, we've talked about it, but in a generic way, but we've not talked about a specific area, because a multicultural organization in Uganda is not the same as a multicultural organization in, let's say, in Europe. Yeah, we can't really say they are the same. Would we?
No, they're not the same.
They are not the same. So I think that is also one thing, as we discuss it, we can go back and even edit in our introduction in the background to specify in which particular context, in a developing country like Uganda, in a place like, let's not even say developing, in a place like Africa. Let's put it in Africa. So I would go back and edit it in that way. Eddie, you have a question?
Yes, Doctor. I wanted to ask, at what point do we need to understand the different cultural groups that exist in a particular organization and study? Okay,
let's first finish this, but then I'm going to point out to you how this ties into now where your chapter developments come in. You remember, but we shall discuss that. Let's discuss that a bit later. Let's first, I would, along this way, I would go and make ahead and make working in the form organizations. Let's say, I would say in Africa. Yeah. So I would go ahead and make those changes so that later on when we pick our case, and even now when we're trying to say, determine the makeup of a multicultural workplace, we also want to see it in terms of in Africa, or would say maybe we can even narrow it down to Uganda. In Uganda, we can say Africa, then here in the introduction, Africa, and then and more specific, Uganda, because we are quite culturally different. Even if you said let's say I think I've had some little interaction with Kenyans. Kenyans are a little bit more westernized than Ugandans, I would say, a little bit more. So so design a culture diversity training for a multicultural organization in Uganda. Yeah. Then so this design would be based on understanding what makes up a multicultural organization in Uganda. What makes up. Then develop a cultural diversity training. Then 3, what would be our third objective? We implement it, not so.
To you, Doctor.
Yeah.
A little bit to say. I am beginning to understand the query that Pauline was trying to put across. In respect to the specific objectives, I know that our concept is supposed to flow systematically, like you've always mentioned. And somehow what we are trying to describe is associated with our understanding of the multicultural organization. But somehow something is missing out from our title, which are probably supposed to guide us when it comes to the specific objectives.
Yeah.
You know, when you say that cultural diversity training in workplaces, that one alone is a bit hanging. It misses out something. Probably we should mention what we want to address. Are we looking at the challenges of multicultural workplaces? Are we trying to implement or find solutions to the challenges associated with multicultural workplaces? Probably that is something that we need to mention in our title first.
Okay.
And then when we come to the specific objectives, our specific objectives are closely associated with what we would like to address in this particular concept paper.
Okay, so I think at the moment we don't really have a title. We said a research area. We don't yet actually have a title.
Yes.
This is not a title as of yet. I think this was just a work, should I say, an identified research
A broad
area.
topic to discuss on.
Sorry?
Like a broad topic to have
Yeah,
a discussion.
a broad topic, but it's not yet the topic. And also another thing I also want to truly discourage you from is to immediately have a title without first fully understanding your problem. That is one of the things I would discourage you from. Why? Unless you first understand what your problem is, you can't know what it is you're going to do. So that's the first step. So at the moment, of course, all of this we are doing something without even actually going through literature. The first thing for us to understand what the research problem is first of all going through literature and then finding out what the gap is, what have other researchers said. Vincent, you have a question?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, please.
I think we are on the right track, because after having the research area, now James is able to come up with a research topic. So I think we're on the right direction.
Yeah, I would severely discourage you from having a topic first and then developing. No, everything should start with a research problem which has been clearly understood. Yes, Eddie.
Yes, Doctor, it's the submission. It's yes, we start with identifying a problem, we generate a topic. And then from the topic, you have the objective. That is the right research process. But there is something I wanted to say or comment about, or seek clarification. There are studies that are guided by theories.
Yes, that is
Where
true.
you have where you have a theory that guides your study.
Yes.
And I don't know if in a concept paper you can easily identify a theory that you're going to apply in your study or something. Then, for example, you can
there is a section. Actually,
I'm
Eddie, there's a
diverting
section.
a bit.
Sorry, there's a section
I'm
actually.
diverting
Eddie, yeah, there's a section in the concept paper where you do identify a theory that you're going to use. That is just before you state, or rather you describe your research design.
I have a question, Doctor.
Yes, Kenneth.
Is the approach deductive or inductive in nature?
I think Eddie answered that question. He said he actually said that we don't have any variables so far. We don't have so far we're actually suggesting a solution to a proposed problem, and we want to find out if that can actually bring about cohesion. We are assuming all of the things we are doing, we are assuming research gaps are saying there is a lack of cohesion, and maybe someone proposes.
An addition, Doctor.
Yes,
Doctor.
please, Eddie.
Could you please scroll down at our objectives? Just for better understanding.
Let me just. Okay, there.
Yes. Now, where are they?
Are they here the specific objectives?
The objectives.
Yeah.
Now, Kenneth, if you look at these objectives, even the suggestions that we've been making, nobody has come up with something to do with that, to examine, to assess, or do something. Just from our own contributions, whoever comes up says to understand, to identify, which are purely qualitative in nature. Just by that, you can easily tell that this research is either qualitative or quantitative.
Yeah.
And I remember Doctor said that is it qualitative is inductive, and then quantitative is deductive.
It's deductive.
So
yeah. Okay. So thank you for that, Eddie. So then we implement our cultural diversity training and then evaluate. So I don't know how to put this, but I would evaluate afterwards to answer the question, to determine, has implementing a cultural diversity training actually brought about cohesion? Yeah, evaluate the effectiveness of the cultural, or the effectiveness of the cultural, maybe I might have rephrased, the cultural diversity training in introducing, should I say introducing, or in bringing about cohesion at the workplace between culturally diverse employees, something like that. I'm just roughly thinking. Yes, Eddie.
Yes, Doctor. If there is anything I would like maybe to suggest for you to make clear to my colleagues and understand, because at least from here I know something about this. Based on these objectives that you've crafted, they are more of a research project objectives
Mm.
and non-research. Okay, they slightly differ from a dissertation style.
Mm.
They are more of a research project
Mm-hmm.
where you have the design, you implement and evaluate. This is there's somebody who was asking about how this is related, how the topic or what we are doing is related to ICT.
Mm.
And when it comes to designing and implementing and evaluation, that can explain the ICT part of it. But although it is a social science, but according to the way these topics or the objectives are stated here, they are more of a project objectives, research project objectives.
Now,
where
what I
your,
would ask you
your
is,
literature
first,
review is basically based on the first objective.
your literature review is based on the first object. Now, the first thing I would ask you is, what are dissertation objectives?
They
Give me an
when you look at
example.
dissertation, oh, okay, okay, my first comment was that we identify the different dimensions of is it multicultural in this case? Now there are those various dimensions that you include in your literature review as subsections or sub-themes. Okay, they formulate the themes in this case, but you can identify about 3 or 4 where each makes up an objective. But that's after clarifying our topic up.
Sorry, so I'm not getting you.
I'm saying that now in this case, you can have, okay, there's something I wanted to use as an example because this multicultural I don't understand well. Is it okay for me to drift a bit?
If you could, sorry?
And is it okay for me to drift a bit from multicultural and bring in something else that I can easily explain?
Yes, please do so.
Now, assuming we have a study of, let's say, service quality, and okay, inpatient service quality. I'm now taking on a hospital setting. Okay, example. Inpatient service quality and service quality and inpatient satisfaction in, let's say, IHK hospital. And now I'm having the 2 variables, that is service quality and satisfaction levels. And now I want to study and see if my patients are satisfied with the quality of service that are delivered or rendered to them. In this case, you may find that we have some theories like Zeta Savaka model, which measures maybe the tangibles, the reliability, empathy. Now we use such elements to study the service quality. Those are the different dimensions. They form the different dimensions of our independent variable in this case, which is the service quality.
So essentially, you're telling us about a quantitative research,
somehow.
Yes.
Where now we have empathy, let's say empathy, and its effect, and how people perceive or see how do they empathy and satisfaction, tangibles and satisfaction. Then how reliable are our services or patient nurses and what have you, everything that is provided in the hospital. And are people satisfied with something like that? Okay. Maybe if I put it on paper, I can explain it well, but something like that, where you have the different dimensions.
You want to share a screen and you put it down?
Can
you want to share the screen and then you maybe jot down what you're saying?
It's okay.
Okay, so let me just stop sharing.
Okay. I don't know if everyone can see what. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah, we're able to see it.
Okay. Now assuming this is the topic where we have the two variables, and then we need to identify the different dimensions of service quality. In this case, you are going to use based on the SAVAK model, which is the theory that is underpinning our study.
Eddie, if I may ask,
yes.
Yes, Colonel.
When you say service quality and impatient satisfaction, when you talk about variables, which variables are you identifying from there?
The variables. You see the quality, you see service quality or the quality of services just by its nature differs.
Okay. So it becomes
and
one
then
of the
even satisfaction among us, just like the satisfaction that we have for this lecture differs.
Okay.
We have people who are satisfied more and people who are less satisfied.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
So now we can have the tangibles. In this case, the tangibles can be physical property. You understand? The hospital, buildings, everything. The words, those are something to do with that. You see? So you can have different elements under each. Then empathy. In this case, you're going to say, do hospital workers empathize with the patients? How do patients see reactions from their attendants? You get the point. Then reliability. I'm going to use those three. I know they are about 6 or 5. I don't know. But reliability. And now, doctor.
Yes, please.
If we can look at these three, each
This
can
become objective.
An objective on its own.
Now, Eddie, let me just stop you there. Now, those three become objectives, yes. What you're basically describing is a quantitative research, where those three become hypotheses.
Yes.
Eddie, are you getting me?
Yes.
Those three become hypotheses. So that is a project that alone is not research. It's not only quantitative research that is research. That's just one approach. Now, let me first go back to share. So it's also research. I'm not in any way putting it down, it's research, definitely, but what you're pointing out is quantitative research. Now, when we started with Kenneth's suggestion, there was a hint that there was a need to implement a cultural diversity training in workplaces, a hint. So of course, one, we haven't read about this area. This was just something that was suggested. Now, we are working in right now as I'm describing this, I'm working in a what if situation. In the introduction here where we said, this should actually be, what are researchers proposing in relation to? Now let us assume, maybe there's a researcher who says, one researcher says there's a need to prepare people to work together, or there's a lack of cohesion because of this, and then someone else said, some people are suggesting diversity training. And from that, Kenneth as a researcher then latches on and says, okay, let me implement this in an organization that is experiencing lack of cohesion because of cultural diversity. Okay, we are assuming, let me put even the quotes here. We are assuming that there is an identified need to prepare or train employees in a multicultural setting. Now, therefore, that becomes an objective. Now, Eddie, because you first determine the makeup and then you design and then you implement, does not mean that makes it a project. Yeah, it doesn't make it. This evaluation at the end is what will give you an answer. Now, Eddie, let me show you my thesis, so that let me see, I don't know if you can see my screen. Just give me a minute. Okay, Eddie, I'm going to now. I'm just showing you a sample of my thesis, which was implementing. So it says, what makes up a developing context? Now, but actually, Eddie, what you have pointed out gives me another hint on what needs to change. This question helped me identify the theories. Yeah, the theories that I needed to use so this would be my objective 1. This would be my objective 2. And this was a purely qualitative research. Yeah? Then this was my objective 3. That was the methods. And this would be my objective 4. Yeah. And this was my objective 5. Yeah. So you realize that this was, because it was exploratory, I wasn't talking about variables, because it was a purely exploratory research. Okay, so Eddie, you notice that it isn't that as long as only when you have variables, that's when your research is research. Eddie, have you got my point?
Yes.
Okay, so let us come back here. We can actually try and rethink our objectives, but we can actually even change this one to ask about what theories. What theories can guide the design of a multicultural, because this research will definitely, the design of a diversity, training of a cultural diversity. Training for blah, 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 for an organization. And then we can also ask what methods can be used to implement that particular training. We can turn this into objectives, and then what makes up. So this would be the design part. What makes up a cultural diversity training for a organization in Uganda. Yeah, so this would be the design part. Then at the end of it, we'd expect some kind of evaluation. Yeah, we'd expect some kind of evaluation to see if it does actually create some diversity, some effectiveness. I don't know if I've lost everyone. Everyone is quiet.
No, we are following, Doctor.
Yeah, yeah, we are following.
Okay, so I've used questions, but this can be turned into, I would advise I turn them into objectives, because for most the UMU staff, they are not used to the questions. But for me, I prefer questions because I know then what I'm answering. I'll turn them into objectives. Now, remember the point I told you. Let me do a new share. Remember the point I told you that for every objective explain. You see here what I did, what my supervisor told me, that for every objective explain, because immediately the reader knows the purpose of this objective and how it's going to contribute to your overall objective. So give an explanation. Although for most dissertations, you don't find those explanations. For me, I would say put an explanation so that your reader, even your supervisor, once they see it, they know this objective is going to lead to this. Yes,
Yes,
Ed?
Doctor. Is this the PhD thesis?
Yes.
No, for PhD it is okay. You can explain.
No, but even
But,
now, no, Eddie. The reason for explaining, when you put the explanation, is for your reader to understand.
But again, we are told to keep our objectives precise and concise.
Yes,
to
the
the point.
objective is still precise and concise. Look at this question. Isn't it precise and concise?
It
It's
is.
precise and concise. The explanation is for the reader to understand why.
Then, Doctor, another thing is,
Yeah.
some institutions limit students on the number of pages.
Yes,
So
for masters,
when
it is 75 pages.
75 pages. Now, for
Minimum,
somebody who's
that's
doing
minimum.
faculty,
75
minimum, for
pages is
somebody,
minimum.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
For
the
somebody
minimum.
who's doing a qualitative study, because from what I know, qualitative is all about writing and explaining everything. Don't you think that if okay, leave alone Uganda matters where they say a minimum of this, but I've seen where they say a proposal is supposed to be not more than 25 pages. Now, for such a
Now, for what I remember, what I advise students that make sure at least your chapter 1 is 15 pages. If your chapter 1 is 15 pages, how can your proposal be 25?
it's challenging.
Your proposal can't be 25 pages.
Actually, it is what UMI recommends.
Yeah, but
25 pages.
I think the 25 pages is quite small. If your minimum pages should be 75 minimum.
That's
Yes,
why you
Vincent.
end up.
Yes, doctor. I see your research objectives are put as research questions.
Yes.
So how is that?
Now for you, because UMU is used to research objectives, just turn your question into a research objective. For example, here we turned what makes up, we said determine the makeup of a multicultural workplace. This second one can be what theories, determine the theories that will guide design of a cultural diversity training program. Yeah, just turn that into. Now, Vincent, you're asking how come, why research questions? Any research, be it qualitative or quantitative, must start with a research question. Why? Because there's a research gap. There's something that needs to be understood, but has not been. It's something that has not been discovered. Yeah. So it must be a research question, come what may. Although most people assume it must be a research objective, the research objective must be coming from a research question. Vincent, I don't know if I've answered your question. Now, however, I'm not telling you write research questions. What I would say is, in your dissertation, start with a research question, which you then convert into a research objective.
That means in the upper section, what we have here is what we would have in the upper section of research questions. If you scrolled up.
Let me see. I scroll up to.
There's where we may state the research here on the research. No.
Lower.
Down a bit.
Yes. Would it be here? State the research question.
Yeah.
Yeah. State the research question.
Yes.
Yeah. Answer. You explain
yes.
this in relation to what you discussed in your research gap. So probably here you'd start with saying that basing on the identified research gap from here you would maybe quote, reference some of the authors who pointed out. This research will be centered on the research question, blah, 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 blah. Yeah? Yes. Then you explain why it's, again, you explain why it is significant, referencing the other authors. And then you state here, therefore, the research objective of this research is blah, 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 blah. you convert the research question into an objective. I don't know if I've made things clear.
Yes, a bit clear.
It's clear, Doctor.
Thank you.
Okay. So now here's the other point. Now, when this, because this is qualitative in leaning. This first objective then guides your chapter 2. Your chapter 2. Now, this is just, I'm not saying that this is what would appear in your proposal, but this would be what guides your chapter 2. Your chapter 2 will be to determine the makeup of a multicultural organization in Uganda. This is where you provide a description of the domain of a multicultural organization, what it looks like. Yeah, this most of the time there may be the types that multicultural organization in Uganda must be these multinational organizations like MTN, Airtel,